ready, I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter as well.
Sweet. Sounds good.
All right. Everyone, enjoy your session. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to enter them in the questions panel, and I'll read them out loud to Chris at the end.
Yep. Just give me a second here. I'm trying to show my screen. All right.
I can see it.
All right. So everybody see Pragmatic Works? And
It's
no
awesome.
one says is awesome, of course. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And again, if you have any questions, go ahead and answer them. Yeah, answer them yourself, because I won't. No, I'm just kidding. Ask them, and then we'll answer them as we go along. So what's today's session? Like Rachel said, is the first SSIS control flow task. Now I know that a number of you have already created tasks, but I think as we go through it, there might be something that you pick up. That's what's great about these webinars, is even if you know some of the stuff that's in it, there's always that little piece of knowledge that you can gain from it. Now, last time that I did this, I stopped at about an hour and said, okay, guys, this is about an hour here if you want to jump off, and then we went on for about another half hour talking about some other advanced stuff like debugging and all that kind of stuff. And I will do that again today, but hopefully we get through most of it that we can. Again, my name is Chris Rock. I'm the program manager of Task Factory, which is a collection of SSIS control flow tasks and data flow tasks. And I am the co-author of Professional Microsoft SQL Server 2012 Integration Services from ROCKS. That's a long, long title. I just realized it. Anyways, so pick that up if you haven't yet. It has a lot of great information from Brian Knight and a bunch of other good authors, including myself. But I'm not saying I'm a good author. Either way. All right, so today what we're going to cover, we are going to create a send HTML email task. The reason I chose that is I think it's a real-world example of how you can do something like that. And I chose a code base that is readily available on Codeplex. So you guys can, as soon as this is over, go grab that code base, and I'll show you where to get that, and then we'll be able to, if you have any questions, you can email them to me. And the great thing about the Codeplex is if you have a question, you can actually answer it or ask it out on the website, and either myself or Todd or whoever will answer the question for you. So we're going to cover what references you need, the attributes and inheritance that you need to use. We're going to talk about the design time code, which is pretty minimal in a control flow task. We're going to talk about the runtime code, and what I mean by that is the functions that are executed during design time and executed during runtime, building the custom UI, and then we're going to talk about the post-build events, and what that is as soon as you compile your control flow task, it will automatically copy out to the GAC and copy out to a special folder where it's needed. And then again, we'll go over some questions. So here is the example that we're going to use. It's a real-world example. I cannot say that right. Real-world example. There we go. And you can grab it at sendhtmlmailtask.codeplex.com. And then what it does is it sends HTML mail tasks, and it can be expanded for your specific needs. So if you needed to do something else, like send through POP3 or IMAP, whatever you want to do, you can do that there. And I want to thank Todd McDermott. I'm using his code base. The last time I used John Welch's code base, and it worked out really well. So, all right. So that's it. I hate slides. If you can, please take notes, and again, ask questions as we go along. So here it is. This is the send HTML task, and the first thing that you need to know about control flow tasks is that you're going to, when you create your project, and I'm going to go ahead and just create a new project here real quick, you need to create there we go. And in this case, it's C#, but you need to create a class library. All right, and so when we go into my class library here, I'm going to close this down. You can look here. It's a simple thing, class library. So all control flow tasks are class libraries. There are two references that you need for this basic task, and that is Microsoft.SQLServer.DTS.Design and Microsoft.SQLServer.ManageDTS. Now, both of those, if you have 2008, well, by the way, we're targeting 2008, SSIS 2008 in this, almost all of your references that you'll need are always in the GAC. So you can see here, if you look at this location here, let's grab it out of there. You can see it's right here. All right. So all your references are usually going to be in the GAG. Now, when you download this project, it should automatically resolve those out to the GAG, so you shouldn't have to do any extra work with that. All right. So that is the references. So the first class that we're going to look at is the base class that is going to be your control flow test. Now, this class is responsible for all the design time code and the runtime code. It all sits in the same task. Now, we have a separate UI that we'll look at in a few minutes, but this is what you need to start. All right. So the first thing you need to do is this is what controls the attributes and the inheritance that you're going to use, and that is Microsoft SQL Server.dts.runtime. So if you can see here, you can see DTS and task here that we're going to look at in a second. You comment it out, you can see exactly where they're coming from. So you always have to have that reference. The system model, I'm just showing you a quick example of something with that, but it's not necessary unless you're using something we'll look at in a second. But this tells, well, you can see right here, this attribute tells SSIS about your task. Now, it also tells BIDS about your task. And what I mean by that is that you can see there's a direct correlation here to everything that shows up in BIDS. So your display name, your UI type name, which we'll cover in a second, the icon resource, and the product. Now, the required product level, what that is that if you need some sort of specific thing or requirement that this needs to be enterprise or work group or anything like that, you can do that there. You can actually say that this requires, you can see right there. But in this case, we don't require any specific level. But I want to show you this. So this is your display name, and this is your icon resource. And so when we add it to SSIS, or we add it into the toolbox, you can see right here that BIDS reads that. And actually, where is it? Oh, there it is. I was missing it there. You can see that that's the display name, that's the icon, and then we can go back in here. And like the task contact, if something fails during the execution, the task contact will show up. And then the UI type name is the type of UI. So if you just click here, you can see that it opens up the UI. But that is the class, the assembly, the version, and we'll cover that more in a second. And then you have to have all this, the public key token and all that for your class. So that's it with the DTS test. All right. So the next thing you need to do is you need to inherit the Microsoft SQL Server DTS runtime.task. And what that does is it gives you overrideable functions that you can override for validate, execute, and some other tasks or some other functions that you can control. And to show you that, I'll just start typing in here. So you can say public override. And then what you'll see is a couple of functions that show up. And these are all from, I think most of them anyway, not equals or get hash code or anything like that, but like update, execution value, can update, all those are from this class right here. And so we have a couple others down here we're going to look at in a second. All this stuff here, not really going to cover it because it's just basic information. It's just enumerations that are used by the HTML task. These are your private variables that are your setters, for your setters and getters, for your public properties. And the constructor, again, is just initializing, so it's not doing anything specific to SSIS. So let's take a look here. Now, public properties. Anything that you have as a public property can be set and used within your task. So we're going to look here. All these are all our public properties here. And so if you click on the task and you press F4, which will bring up the properties window, you can see all those properties. So you can see the attachments property, which is somewhere here. It doesn't really matter. So there's attachments, and there's body source right here. So you can see that there's a correlation there. Now you notice that some of them have an enum. And now what's nice about the enums is that SSIS will read those automatically and will provide drop-downs for your end user or for yourself that you can put in there. So you can actually use these drop-downs or provide enum values, and it will set those by drop-down rather than having someone have to type in the enum value or anything like that. It's a really nice feature of SSIS that it automatically reads those and provides the drop-down there for you. All right, so those are your properties. And so there's one thing that I want to cover about properties, and that is that at some point when you're creating control flow tasks, for instance, our compression task in Task Factory it can contain a property, our password property rather. And what this allows you to do is hide the value when it saves it to the DTS XML. So if I don't have one here, it's there, but it's not really doing anything. So when it saves it as encrypted. And so what this allows you to do is you can transport that and not have to worry about anybody reading that password in clear text. And that's what this property, or password property text attribute does. And that comes from the system.component model. So if you want to have password protected properties, or even just, it doesn't even have to be a password, it can be anything that you want to encrypt, you can put it as a password property text. All right? So that's just a simple test. It's not really used. I'm just giving you an example of it. All right. So at design time, there is really one method that is being used, and that is validate. Now, validate, its sole purpose is to validate the property or the task before it gets executed and while you're in design time. And so it's, if you look here, it passes, and this is all passed in by SSIS or anything. But you have to return a specific result from this class. You have to say, all right, did this fail? Did it succeed? Whatever. And you can see result equals, and we'll just say DTS. DTS. And you can see that we have a couple of different return values that you can. Now, usually it's either failure or success that you want to pass back. And in this case, what we're doing is we're setting it to validate. And then this is just a base validate. You can do this. It's not really necessary, but it's there in any case. I think it's just about it's doing anything that's wrong internally in the metadata when you call base.validate. But this is where the real magic happens. You're going to have to check all of your properties. And I'm going to give you an example of this. So if I click on this and I press F4 and I come down here to my property, and the reason I'm doing it here is if I come in here and I try to do it, it won't let me because there's values in the UI, or there's checks in the UI to prevent you from doing that. But you can come over here, take out the subject, and automatically you'll get an error. You can't see it now because I have a breakpoint, which I'm going to remove. All right, so let's go here, set 4. I don't think I took it out. All right, well, of course it's going to make me look like a moron right now. It's supposed to do it, unless I took it out. Let's for whatever reason it's not working right now, or it's just not showing me the errors. Let me rebuild it real quick. There we go. Yep. All right. There it is. So for whatever reason, it wasn't doing it before, but automatically it should show you, so you can see that little thing show up. The to address must be specified, and so we'll come in here, we'll put these back in, we'll say test, and then prog at. All right, and so it should fix it. If you take it out, it should fail. So there you go. So you can see that it's just validating. So anytime that you change, one of your properties, it's going to validate. It's going to call validate automatically to make sure that all of your validations have passed. So we're going to put this back in here. And we should be good to go. Now the validate runs twice. It runs at design time, but it also will run right before it calls initialize task as well. Or if you don't have initialized task, right before it calls execute. And if something's wrong, it won't let you actually execute the package or execute the property, or it actually won't let you execute the package. So if we take this out again, try to hit run, we can see here that it's not going to allow us to run because there's problems with the validation. All right, simple stuff. So let's go back over here. Let's put this back in. Perfect. All right, so all this does here is it's going through. Todd did a really good job about explaining everything he did here, but let's explain this real quick. What you have here is it's just basically saying, I'm going to do, let's do subject, so because we're on that subject. So is the subject null, and does it have a value of 0, or a length of 0? If it does, throw this error. Now component events, what it allows you to do is fire information. So if you say fire information, it won't fire, it'll fire an informational message. If you fire progress, all that kind of stuff. But that can be used not only during design time, but also during runtime. But in this case, we're saying fire an error, telling us what happened, and now set the result. What did I do there? Huh. There you go. Set the result to failure. So when it gets to this point right here, when it returns, this tells bids that, hey, or tells SSIS engine, this is failing and don't continue. All right, does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about any of that? I don't see any questions. So if you do, ask them, all that kind of. So, and if anything happens, the way that this is set up is that if anything happens during the validation as well, it's just going to give a generic message. You know, for instance, anything weird happens. This is just a catch-all saying, okay, something else happened outside of what we thought would happen, return failure. All right, and so that's validate. Validate, again, runs during design time when you change any kind of property, and then it will run right before execute, and it will prevent the code from actually executing if it, did somebody just come off mute? Sorry. Anybody, or right before execution. All right. I'm not using initialize task, but you can see here that you can use it. I have no reason to use it in this case, but in this, you see right here, it's not really doing anything. Let me go here. But this allows you to do certain middle, you know, it's just like sort of like almost a constructor for the runtime. It allows you to initialize, if you have to initialize or create folders or anything like that before you actually execute, you can run initialize task right before execute. And then this is the magic of this whole task. This is execute. Now execute is called every time you execute the task. And in this case, what we're basically doing is we're just setting up a system mail message, and we're adding all of our properties to it. So we're saying this is the message from, message reply to, all that kind of stuff. So we're adding all the stuff that needs to be added to the mail message. And then you can, what this is doing here, which is a pretty cool little piece of code, is it's going out to our connection managers, which we have one of them here. So our connection managers, it's reading that connection manager and saying, okay, what's our connection manager? And then it's taking the, you can see here, it's taking the connection string, which is passed back from acquire connection. We'll talk about this in a second. But it pulls back the connection string and then sets up our SMTP server name, and then that's used down here. So you can see right here that it's using our SMTP server name and then calling send. Now, acquire connections, what that does is depending on the type of connection manager that you have, it will return a value. In this case, what the acquire connection does for the SMTP connection, which is right here, is it just returns a connection string, and it basically returns this right here. So, not that. It returns this string right here. All right, so what we're able to, you can see here what it's doing is the code is splitting that up, and then it's grabbing the first value right here. All right, and that's what that's why when we look at it, it's calling SMTP server rock XP. So it's calling and grabbing the server, the SMTP server that we're using, and then using it. Does that make sense? If anybody questions, ask them. But it's pretty easy code here. And again, if you have acquired connections on something else like an OLDB connection or an ADO.NET connection, it passes back a different value. So it's either the connection object for ADO or OLDB. It's completely different for each connection manager. All right, and then that's it. So it calls send, and then it returns a success value. And again, execute does the same exact thing, that it needs to know whether this execute method succeeded or failed. And so we're going to assume failure at first, and then if it gets to the point where it actually sends, then we return success. And that's it. And I don't think that's really it for this part of the HTML or the task. But we're going to cover a few more things here. Up here, remember we are going back to, well, before I do that, any questions about the task? I don't see any.
We have a couple questions, Chris.
Okay, I don't see them for some reason.
I think it's because you're a presenter, not an organizer. I can promote you in 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, your first one is, can we create user controls in SSIS like control, which is a combination of controls, and use the same in other projects or across the company?
So you're talking. I'm not really understanding that question. Can you
Yeah,
can
I'm
you repeat
making
it?
you an
Okay.
organizer now. So can you see
Hey,
them
there we
now?
go. Okay, let me. Yeah,
Perfect.
like control, which is a combination of controls, and use the same. No, it's really more of a single one-off thing. So I mean, you can like Task Factory, you can create a project that has a bunch of controls, and then you can install that single assembly, and then it will be available anywhere that you install it. So definitely, you can create a, I guess, sort of like a combination of controls, like you're thinking there. But it's really just a assembly that contains more than one class that is a control flow task. So for instance, if I were to take send HTML task and I were to copy it and put it, I'm hesitating to do this, but I'll just do it real quick, and then I call this one FTP mail task or something like that, and then I went in and I changed all the properties, then you will have two components available for this single assembly. Task Factory does that, where I think we have 38 different tasks and control flow items, and they're all in a single assembly. So yes, you can do that. I have to take my words back. Yes, you can do that. Oh, let me do. Whatever. Let me delete this, and let me go back in and look at these questions real quick. All right. All right. If you in your demo you access the send H from Codeplex in a production system, would you not want the send mail? Yeah, absolutely. You have to install any of these components. So if you're using this component on your server, the server has to have this component on it. All right. Does that make sense? I think it was. Let me expand this a little bit so I can see who asked this. Can I bring this out? Oh, there you go. That's perfect. I can see it. Gary, I think that if you have another question about that, just I think that's what you were asking, is that you access the send HTML from Codeplex in production. Would you not want? Yes, you have to have it on your server. So anywhere that you want this to be executed from, you have to have it installed on that server, and that has to be installed in the GAC, and it has to be installed. Well, on a production server, it only has to be installed in the GAC. Anywhere that you want to use it in design mode, it has to be installed in, I'll show you real quick, Program Files, x86, Microsoft SQL Server, there it is. Put this back over here. For this case, it's 2008, so we need it in 100, DTS, and task. So you can see here that my HTML task right there. So you can see it's sitting right there. I don't know why these are in here, but oh yeah, I mean I know why. But you can see that Task Factory is in there. So when you install Task Factory, you install any sort of custom component that you need to use in bids, it has to be in this folder right here. Now again, like we had talked about with the control flow task, or for the data flow task, the data flow tasks have to go into pipeline components. Now you can see that send HTML task isn't in here because it had no pipeline components, which are data flow tasks. Okay, and then everything again goes into the GAC. All right, I think that's all that for questions for now. All right, perfect. So we are going to continue. All right, so the UI. Now the UI is a, you can have, if you don't specify this attribute right here, what will happen is it will just create a sort of that default view for the UI, and I'm going to run a quick test here. I'm just going to take this out real quick. I'm going to build, and then what we should see, well, actually what's going to happen is it's probably going to fail unless I add it again. Yeah, so you can see here if you don't provide a UI, it says this task does not have a custom editor, use the properties window. So you always want to give your task a UI, and so that's why we provide the UI here. So we're going to put it back in here. And then what this is telling us is that where do we get this UI? Now the UI has to be a specific class. And what I mean by that, it has to inherit a class, or actually implement an interface. And that interface is IDTS task UI. And the only thing that this really does in this case is implements a couple of methods here. Now you can see initialize and stuff like that. But really what we're doing here is there's a function called getView. And what getView does is says, all right, once we want to see this UI for this task, call our editor. And this is our UI right here. And so all we're doing is saying we're instantiating a new instance of that UI or that form class and calling it, and that's it. And that's all. The only thing, you don't have to say like you know, in regular VB or regular code, you have to say send HTML editor equals new, you know, stuff like this, and then you have to say editor.show, you know, or show dialog. Well, you don't have to do that here. You just return the class or the editor that's going to be used, and SSIS will handle everything else. Now, what this is doing right here with the initialize is that you can see here that these two tasks, there are these two classes here, we need in our HTML or in our editor because we have to alter the properties of this task. And so there's two of them that we're using in this case, and one is the task host, which is really just it's how we can set and retrieve properties, and you can also, excuse me for a second, and then you can also use other stuff right here where all we're doing here is we're getting the connections from the service provider. So we also need the connections. And the reason we need the connections is in here. I got to recompile real quick. Sorry, guys. Slight detour. I had to prove my point, and now I messed myself up. All right. Good thing this machine's running fast today. All right. So what we're doing is in our editor, which we're going to see here in a second how we do this, is we're providing a list of our connection managers. So if I were to come in here and I created a new one, or I'm just going to copy and paste this one, I can actually see all those right here. All right. Now it's only going to show SMTP because we filter them out, but that's basically why we need the connections. And so we can see here that we have connections, and what we're doing is we can't get those from getView. We have to set those to module level variables, and then we pass them in to our editor. And so our editor, if we look at our constructor for our editor, let's go look at it again. Here it is. And so now we can retrieve, we can grab those objects from the UI class or the interface class here and use them in our editor. Pretty cool. Any questions? Oh, got a question. You shouldn't need a UI. You shouldn't need an ID. Let me check here. I don't think that I'm logged in. Yeah, I'm not logged in here, and I'm able to download. So if you click on source code and you click on download right here, you should get the source code. All right. All right. So any questions about the user interface code? It's pretty. The only thing you have to remember with this is you have to initialize your classes that you want to use and your SSIS classes that you want to use in your UI, and then you have to pass those classes or those objects into your editor UI class. All right, cool. So moving on. Now, what this does here is we have to retrieve values from the task host. And in this case, what we're doing, first off, I'm going to come back to this in a second, but we can see here we have a couple of different areas here. So what it does is all of our properties for our task host, all of our properties are contained on this task host. So you can see here that from address is referring to the from address property right here. All right? And then so you're able to call the task host, call that, get value, and then you pass in the task host and you pull out the value. All right, and we'll take a look at this when we run. I'm going to run this in debug mode, and we can see how that works out for us. And then all it's doing here is it's going through and doing the same thing for every single one of these. So it's saying if I have a property, a reply address, set the text reply address text to the value, and it goes through and does all that for all these. Now this is some really interesting code here. What this does, again, when we set the value for our SMTP connection or SMTP connection manager ID, what we're doing is we're using the ID of the connection manager. And so if we look over here at our code and we look at our, right here, we can see a GUID. All right, and that GUID is referring to this identifier, and you can see right here, of our connection manager. So we're able to retrieve that value, and then what we do here is we iterate through the connection managers, and then we go, okay, any connection manager that has a creation name of SMTP, we're going to add it to our list. So if we were to go in here and we were to add just a new, I don't know, we'll just do a ADO connection. Hopefully, okay, make it easy. And we can see that we don't get the OLDB connection here. We just get the SMTP, and that's because we can look at creation name, and we'll run through this too. We can look at creation name and go, okay, I just want to filter those out, and that's all I want in here. And then we just add it to the connection or to the combo box. Any other question here? We can go to, yes, you can go to that site, and I'll answer that in a second. Okay. And then if we have a value right here, what we're doing is we're saying grab the connection manager or connection ID. If that value equals the current connection ID, we're setting just a temporary connection name, and we're creating that, and we're setting that as our selected item. So this is basic VB code or C# code that you would do with any other connection or any other combo box. All right. And so that is it for the load. And so basically what it does, again, is it just loads up all the values. So we can see here when we double click on this, it loads up all the current values that we have. And then if we want to save it, we can say Chris Rock at whatever and saving it. And so what we're doing now is we're going to take a look at the OK button and right here. All right. And so basically, just the reverse of what we just looked at. Now we're grabbing the values, all the values, and instead of calling get value, we're calling set value. So again, task host dot properties, whatever the property is, dot set value. You have to pass in the task host here. Oh, what did I just do? Pass in the task host again, and then pass in the value that you're setting that property to. All right, and we go through and do that for every single one here. All right. Now, if you want to make this code a little more awesome, what I suggest here is so that if you come in here and you remove the subject, let's say we remove the subject, all right, we click OK, we can automatically, oh, we got an error. If you want to make it a little better, and this is what I suggest you do, and make your code a little more user-friendly, is add in some validation in here. So you can say if txt subject dot length, I will say dot text dot trim dot length equals 0, and you say message box, you know, something like this, must enter a subject, yeah, well, something like that. And then return. All right. And so what that does, pretty self-explanatory. If you don't have a subject, it won't let you save the task. So that gives you a little bit of UI code, and you can just rebuild that. And nothing exciting, but at least gives you an example of what you can do here. And so we'll come back in. Man, I'm so glad my machine is running fast today. All right, so I'll take that out, and hopefully it gives us, you must enter a subject. There you go. All right. Now you can see what I'm doing there. Every time that I compile, I have to refresh I have to close this down and reopen it. And the reason behind that is if you are changing something on the UI, you have to close down this and reopen it. You have to close down bids and reopen it. if you're changing something in the task itself, like for instance the execute method is messed up or something like that, you don't have to reopen it. You don't have to close and reopen it. So just a little bit of knowledge there for you. So if you change anything in here and it's has to do with nothing with the UI, you can compile it and just run it again and you'll have all the code. All right, so let's continue on with the editor here. So it does some cool things and then it saves it, and then this right here is important. You have to call dialog result equals OK. And the reason behind that is if you hit cancel, then nothing gets saved. All right, and so the dialog result of OK says to SSIS, go ahead and save all the properties that we just set. All right, and just some other simple code here, nothing to do with SSIS or anything like that. It's just basic code here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we've compiled it, we've ran it, or we've written the code, we've written the retrieval code, we've written the setting code, and we're ready to go. And so when you first compile this, and we're going to look at this and see, so when we compile this, what happens here is I have a build event. And what this build event does, I'm going to expand it here a little bit, is it first uninstalls it from the GAC if it's there, and then it will take it and will copy it, and we can see here copy target directory, target code, and it's doing anything with a star. Now you can say DLL just to prevent the PDBs from going in as well, but we'll just leave them in there. So this is just copy, and then it's calling program files, and it's doing, remember I showed you that's where exactly this assembly needs to go, is going to the 100 DTS task, and then we install it into the GAC again. And again, so when you first install it, it's not going to show up over here in your toolbox. Just a thing. Now in SQL Server 2012, that happens. As soon as you copy it over to DTS 110 and into the task folder there, once you have to refresh the UI, the BIDs, or SQL Server Data Tools as it's called now, and it will show up automatically. Unfortunately, that doesn't work the same way with 2008 and 2005. So you have to come in here and you have to click on Choose Items, and then when Choose Items shows up, you go to your control flow items, and you'll see it right here. And so you can click on it, click OK, and now you have it in there. All right, and then you can drag it over and do whatever you need to do with it. So we'll set this up again from Croc. Sorry guys, I didn't think about that I would have to do all this stuff, but we're gonna test, and we're gonna say, now here's another way you can improve this as well. Make this sort of an HTML editor if you can find one. Now in Task Factory we have an advanced HTML task that is a little better. So if you want to see how we set ours up, I don't have them installed here, but does a little better job of allowing you to compose it. But right here you can just copy in some HTML code. So if you have an HTML editor or anything like that, you can copy it in there and you can click on Preview. And so there's a lot of room for improvement here that you guys can add to this to make it a really nice HTML send task. All right. So we covered that. We covered our post build event. And so when we compile, and you can see if you look at the output, so let's build it. You see here, oh, I don't have all my stuff here. It's not showing it. I think it's because I didn't change anything to it. Let me go ahead and change something real quick, like let's see if it does it this time. All right, so you can see here what happened here. It gives you an example of everything that it did. So you can see that it uninstalled it from the GAC, and then it copied it over to this location, and then copied from that location, and then put it back into the GAC. Pretty cool. All right, any questions on that? Alrighty, so we've seen what you need for references. We've seen what you need for you've got your design time code, which is your validate. You've seen your execute. There's one thing that I forgot, and that is of course, with anything that you put into the GAC, it has to have a strong name associated with it. So we're going to go back into here. We're going to do our signing, and you can see here that we have the send HTML mail task. If you try to install it into the GAC, it's going to tell you that it doesn't have a strong name. So you have to have your SNK file here. And ours is just a simple SNK, no password or anything on it like that. So again, with the GAC, you always have to have that. So somebody asked a question. Registered DLL, you simply copy to GAC. Rakesh, can you ask that question again? Registered DLL, you simply copy. No, you have to register. You have to call GAC util. You can't just simply copy into the GAC. All right. Hopefully that answered your question. All right, so one other thing that I kind of glossed over before was the UI type name. Again, so what this is telling us is that this is the class name that we need to look at. So in this case, what we're saying is we have that sendmail interface. So, and it comes from toddmcdermott.ssis.sendmail interface. All right, this is a point of confusion for a lot of people. I know it confused me a lot when I first started. I'm like, what the heck do you need here? And so what this is this is the class name. This is the assembly name. So you're, in this case, well, when we compile our assembly, it's send HTML mail task. This is the version number. So if we go into the GAC, so see Windows assembly, this is going to give us a good idea of, let's see, where's my thing? Okay. You can see here, here's the version number, 1.000, and then it's the culture equals neutral, which if it's not, then you can change to whatever culture. But this is real important too, the public key token. You can see right here, here's our public key token. You have to pass in all that stuff just so when somebody double-clicks on the UI, double-clicks on the task inside of the UI, it pops up, it calls this class right here and initializes the UI. All right. So now what we're going to do, oh, somebody asked one question, so we're going to ask. Can you point to any example of creating a connection manager? Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to answer that in a second. I know that there's a connection manager. If not, guess what my next webinar, I couldn't remember what the heck I was doing here. My next webinar, what I will do is I'll teach a connection manager if I can't find a good example for you. And connection managers are pretty simple too. They're very, very simple to do, just like a control flow task. But I'll, as soon as we're done here at the end, I'll answer that question. All right, so now what we need to do, everybody wants to know how do you debug these, and these are pretty interesting how you have to debug it. There are two modes of debugging. There is design time debugging and there is runtime debugging. They both have to do pretty much the same thing, which is attached to a process. Now, if you've never attached to a process, it's a pretty simple thing. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put a breakpoint on our editor. Oh, I already have it there. And so this is really cool, so we're just going to run through this code real quick. But what you have to do is you have to go back into your code base here, and you're going to just simply attach the process. And what you're going to do is you're going to attach to the development environment. In this case, what we're doing is we're attaching to devm.exe, which is bids. And you can see here, this is the one we're attaching to. And so now that we're attached to it, if I come in here and I do anything that has to do with design time and I have a breakpoint on it, for instance, if I double click on this, there we go. Now I'm attached, and now I can debug this code. And so I can step through it here. I'm going to go through and say, okay, cool, we got our, you can see here it's going back to the HTML task. And we're going to run through, and we grab our connection ID, and then so here we are. We're going through our connection managers. Here's the creation name, and you can see here, look, that's the creation name of the ADO.net. Now, if you're looking for ADO.net, I don't suggest that you look for all of this. What I suggest you do is you do something like, let me do this. You say connection.creation name that starts with ADO.net, something like that, and then you don't have to worry about copying all that whole creation name in there to look for that. But you can see here that obviously that's not the creation name that we're looking for. I'm going to put a little breakpoint here real quick. Next one is SMTP. Next one is SMTP, and we're down the road. All right. So that's how you develop. Now, when you're in design time, there's a couple of things that you not only can you edit the UI geez, I'm lost of words here. Not only can you debug the UI, you can also debug anything to do with design time in your class, your control flow, the implementation of the task. So in this case, really the only thing that I think you can do is you can put breakpoints on the properties, but validate. Now validate, what a lot of people, it's kind of hard sometimes to get this right. So you're going to want to debug this at some point. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to save this, and we're going to see that validate gets called. And so now we're in the validate method, and so we can go through our validate method and debug it. And we just keep going through, and that's really it. Pretty cool, huh? All right. And then, so what we're going to do, any questions on the debugging? I'm going to go ahead and stop debugging on that. Now, this is the more tricky version of this. We're going to debug the execute method or anything. So if you initialize, execute, anything like that. And the way that you have to do that is you have to attach to the DTS debug host. And so what you need is you need a breakpoint, and we're going to do it here on pre-execute. And we're going to go ahead and run it. And at this point, what happens is bids will create a couple of processes. And so you click on attach to process, you can see here you have the DTS debug host. Now you don't want the x86 one, you want the one that says managed. You can see here that we have a managed code. And so we click on that one, and now we can go back and we can run that, but I forgot, I don't think I have a breakpoint on the execute method. Oh, I do. Okay. So now that we have a breakpoint, we can come back here and we can hit start, and now we're debugging the execute method. And so any of your methods that have to do with runtime, you have to attach to that DTS debug host and while you're running. So, and then we just go through all of our code here. Pretty cool, huh? Any questions about that? About debugging? No? Alrighty, guys. You know, I don't know if you have any general questions about this. I've gone through pretty much everything that I'm going through. I left a few minutes left for questions here. Just to recap, all right? We're just going to do a quick recap here. This tells SSIS what it is. You need to inherit this. You need to override validate if you want to validate your method. You need to override execute if you want your method to, if you want your class to execute, or your control flow task to execute. All public properties will end up over here. And the UI name, forget that's important. You have your interface that implements the DTS task UI. Its main purpose is just to launch the editor, and then your editor has to accept some values here. All right. So one of the questions that they asked about was a connection manager. You know, I'm trying to think. I'm going to leave that up for a second here. Google, there we go. And we're going to go to SSIS code flex. There's a big project somewhere. I don't, that's not it actually. Oh, there it is, right there. So this one here, it has a project of, I want to say 5 or 6 different tasks. I don't remember if any of them have a connection manager, but that's it right there. Let me blow that up a little for you. There you go. So SQL Server, it's pretty hard to read, but that's where you go to get that. All right, and we can see here that we have a source code. We can come here, we can click on Browse, and let's see what we have over here. I don't remember if it had a connection manager or not, so let me look through this real quick. Actually, I think you are in luck, because I believe the SharePoint, haha, there you go. SharePoint one has a connection manager. All right, so there's your credential connection manager. So there's a sample for your connection managers, and most likely, if you want to study up a little bit and you want to be part of our next webinar, this will probably be the one that I go over as far as connection. I might make it a little simpler. I might do something like a SMTP or POP3 connection manager or something like that. But because this is pretty thick, it has a lot of information in here. But yeah, there's your example for a connection manager. And again, you have DTS connection. Again, attributes is pretty much the same across the whole thing, across all SSIS tasks. is that you have an attribute, you inherit some sort of value, connection manager base. Yeah, and that's it. So does that answer your question? Can we have error log attached to email? Gang, can you explain what you mean by that? Oh, you mean can we fire? I'm just going to assume can you fire events into the SSIS error log? Is that what you mean, gang? Yes. Okay. Cool. Yes, you can. And remember earlier, I showed you that component events. So component events, what it allows you to do is during either validate or execution, you have these events that you can fire out into the, you can see here, fire error. But if you want information only, you can do that as well. So for instance, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to add a couple of component events. Fire. I'm going to just say fire information, right? I'm going to say mail to, and highlighting, and we're going to say this from address. Actually, that's from, isn't it? Okay. And so what this is going to do is it's going to fire information. Of course, I don't have it right for some reason. What am I missing there? Got that. Oh. Help file. And, oh. Let me put it up here. Picky. All right. So you see here we can call fire information. Now there's a couple of that you can fire. So for instance, if you want to fire an error in this case, I'm just gonna fire an error at the top here. And we're gonna say execute. We're gonna say right, it should be the same. I think it's slightly different. Component description, help file. Yeah, you don't have fire again for the. All right, and so when we run this, I'm going to compile it. Huh? Oh, do I have another one in there? You can see here. He has that set to true, so that's fine. All right, so we're going to go ahead and run this. You know, it just hit me that we never ran this. All right, so you can see here's our error. You say, oh no, it failed. And there's our information, and then you can see what happens if you fire an error. It's going to, even though it's sent successfully, it's going to tell you that it failed because there was an error fired. Okay, does that answer your question? By the way, I'm new to SSIS. Okay, Jeff. Jeff, man, we have a ton of webinars and a ton of, I mean, we have like, I don't remember how much there are. We have classes that go over SSIS, and they're awesome. I think they're a couple $100, but maybe you can get your boss to pay for it. They're really great. So looking to set up an SSIS package with prompts so that the end user can generate flat file data extracts based on any date range. Any suggestion how to do a prompt-driven SSIS package? You know, that's a great question. Looking to set up. Hey, Jeff, do me a favor. Send me an email at croc@pragmaticworks.com, which is croc. Everywhere I'm going, I'm croc at something. So, let's see, right here. All right. And then answer that question, or ask that question again. I'll be able to put more time into it at that point. All right, so gang, did that answer your question as far as how you fire information into the log? I think it did. Yep. All right, cool. So I believe we are at the end. Now again, if you go out to sendhtmltest.coplex.com. You can download this. And then I believe, maybe I'm not, I don't think I am at this point, but I'm going to make myself a part of this class here. And there's Todd there. He's great. He's I think SSIS MVP. It's SQL Server or SSIS, one of those two. He's an MVP for that. And he's written a bunch of stuff, including what we have in our task factory, which we've taken over for the dimension merge SCD. Did a really cool job on that. So he has a lot of knowledge as well. So I'm going to make myself a follower on this. If you come in here and you want a discussion, or if you want to ask a question, if you can't get a hold of me, you can ask the question right here, and we will answer those questions for you. All right. So if there aren't any more questions, I've done a fantastic job today of getting it on time. And yeah, that's it. So I thank everybody for attending and asking any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Chris. That was a wonderful session, and I hope everyone got a lot of great information out of it. I know I did. And be sure to tune in for all of our free trainings on the T's every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, this session was recorded, and it will be posted on pragmaticworks.com under past webinars by Friday, so please check back. Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys, again.
Thanks, Chris.
And girls.